So in this lesson, we want to begin to look at some of the other features that I promised to talk about. And we'll begin that by coming down here and looking under layer commands. Now, if we come to layer commands and we just click on this, you'll see we have several commands. We have group layers, ungroup layers, collapse layers, and drop. Now, the way drop works is that if we have, say, the watercolor layers selected right now, which is currently above the liquid ink layer, when we click drop right here, what will happen is that watercolor layer has been flattened to the canvas and it's now behind the liquid ink layer. So that may be something that you want to happen, or it may not be something that you want to happen. Another way that you can control the way these things go is if you come over here to layers and you choose to drop all. What will happen is everything maintains its stacking order and the liquid ink is underneath the watercolor in the process of where they're all dropped to canvas. Now, of course, this automatically converts liquid ink and watercolor layers to the default canvas whenever you're using this, no matter what you do. I'm going to hit Control Z to undo that. And also under here, you can see that we have drop and select. So drop and select. Let's go back to our liquid ink layer and we'll go to layers and drop and select. What that effectively does is it selects the place where the detail was in that. So let's say that I want to come up to the watercolor layer and I want to do something like select invert selection, and then I'm going to do something like edit clear. And now if I just hit Control D, which is going to deselect that, you can see that the watercolor detail was deleted everywhere but where that was. So this can be a useful thing sometimes. It's a nice technique. It's a little bit complicated and we'll get more into selections later on. But I'm just going to go ahead and undo all those, drop and select. And that's what that drop and select is all about. It's basically selecting the opacity of that liquid ink layer, which of course ends, because this is a very highly graphic effect, it ends very abruptly from black to white. Now, as far as the other ones go, the group and collapse, well, the way we need to do group is we need to hold down with a modifier key, and that would be Shift. So if I select one layer, then hold down Shift, I can select multiple layers. Now let's say I have several layers going on. I'm just going to go ahead and create a bunch of layers. If I hold down Shift, what's going to happen is it's going to get all these layers. So if I start here and hold down Shift, you'll see it selects all those layers. And that may not be what I want. And I'll just scroll this down so you can see more. So that may not be what I want. Maybe I want to pick and choose which layers I want to have happen. Well, what I can do then, and let's say I'm just going to move this up here so that makes more sense. If I hold down Control, I can select just individual layers. So I'm going to grab those two, and now I'm going to come over here and I'm going to say Group. And now those two layers are in a group. And if I turn down that arrow, you can see there's those two layers within that group. The advantage of having a group is that I can turn off the visibility for both layers at once. The other advantage of having a group is I can move them around very quickly within a layer stack and still not have them cluttering up if I don't need to be working with them. So that's a very advantageous thing. And of course, you can still work with things that are within a group individually if you need to. The other thing you can do with a group is you can lock it, just like I've done right here. And what that basically means is that not only is it being grouped and basically hidden from view, but at that point it's also been locked so that we can't make any changes to any of the contents inside. So obviously groups have some advantages. Now, once things have been grouped, what you can do is you can come back over here and you can say ungroup if you want to explode that group back out to its parts, or you can go ahead and group those guys back up again. We can do the collapse layers. And what that basically does is it takes that group and makes a flattened version of that layer, but it's not on the canvas. It's still transparent, as you can see back here. Now, one place that will get you into trouble with this is that you'll notice that that flattened, collapsed layer that you see here, that is going to have that white fringe on that watercolor. Remember I warned you about the white fringe on the watercolor? So if I come back in here and I choose something like our pencil tool and I'll get a black. Oh, there we go. You can see, oh, Control Z, working on the wrong layer. If I work on a canvas, there we go. You can see that white fringe. And that's going to be a problem. You can see how that works. Now, in this instance, what we would do is we would do just like they do in the watercolor layers, which is to set it for gel. However, the problem becomes what happens if you don't want all this to be gelled as well, meaning that you wanted this here to maintain its opacity. When I go through there, you can see that pencil mark right through the center of that green patch there. So when you're collapsing your layers, you generally speaking want to do all of that at the very end, and instead what my advice would be is to use the group function and to lock layers when you don't think you need to work with them, because that's going to give you a much better workflow than constantly collapsing layers, because the collapsing of layers basically forces you to commit to a layer, and that may not always be ideal.